Born from disaster, the humanitarian crisis caused by Cyclone Nargis a year ago provided a test case for Myanmar's military dictatorship and the international community. Could they work together to help the more than 1 million cyclone victims in desperate need? I'm Veronica Pedroza, and in this edition of 101 East, we ask if this historic cooperation has really helped the people in Myanmar's Delta region, and will it continue after the arrest of Aung San Suu Kyi? It was the worst disaster in living memory for the people of Myanmar. The sheer force of Cyclone Nargis pushed the military government to take unprecedented steps. The generals ruling the country, formerly known as Burma, allowed in aid from their Asian neighbours immediately, but it was only after 3 weeks' delay that they reluctantly accepted help from Western nations. 1 year on from Nargis, we wanted to find out if such assistance was making a real difference to those hit by the cyclone. It took some negotiating, but in the end, the military government allowed Al Jazeera unlimited access to the Delta region. We travelled to areas just a few hours' drive from the biggest city, Yangon. In Sekji, life is pretty much back to normal already, but we also went to the area around Phiapone and to Bogale Township, where 10,000 people were killed when Nargis struck. And we were even able to take a helicopter to more inaccessible areas. Here, people are worried about the upcoming monsoon. They fear they won't be able to survive without continued help from the international community. It was unique access to an area that is politically sensitive for the regime and where permission to enter is strictly controlled. What we found are people whose lives are still in the balance and for whom continued assistance is a matter of life or death.
Her name means white flower, only 2 months old. They think it was heat stroke that killed her. We tried to resuscitate, but it was too late. There's no sanitation or health care here. A nurse comes occasionally from the next village. Another needless death in Myanmar's Delta region.
But there's little time to mourn for the people who live here. The monsoon season's just a couple of weeks away, and the villagers tell me that their food stocks are well below the seasonal average, and their shelters still aren't adequate to withstand the winds and the rains that are going to come.
They paint a grim outlook.
Although we try our best, there are not as many fish to catch as before Nargis. The government gave us 14 new boats, but they are too small. We need more equipment.
This is an extraordinary glimpse of the Irrawaddy Delta region. It's the very first time an international broadcaster has been allowed in the area. Access by outsiders is strictly controlled. But there's no hiding the scale and depth of the tragedy that has fallen on this once highly fertile and productive area. We've travelled across the entire region and seen for ourselves over and over again how the strong community spirit of Myanmar people has been the crucial factor in the recovery so far. Most people have some form of shelter and enough food to survive through their own efforts and a little help from the government and international donors. But what's become depressingly clear is that though villagers don't need much to fend for themselves, they're not even getting that.
It's not a great result in terms of other disasters that we could compare with if we looked at the Pakistan earthquake or Sri Lanka or Indonesia with the tsunami. 1 year on, we would expect to be much further down the road, and that's largely to do with the amount of donor funding which is available for permanent shelter.
The Myanmar government sent us here to show how international cooperation is working to benefit the more than 1 million people seriously affected by the storm Nargis. But they didn't prevent us going anywhere else, and it's evident places like this are the rare exception, not the rule. The Myanmar government admits it needs to give more help and wants more international assistance. It's a dramatic change from a year ago, when it was heavily criticised for refusing Western aid for 3 full weeks. But the US and EU are strong critics of the government's human rights record. And they say their sanctions prevent them contributing to what they construe as development in Myanmar. But rural life continues in a centuries-old tradition for what was the Rice Bowl of Myanmar. In some areas, there's little sign of the devastation caused by Cyclone Nargis. But the reality is that the massive storm caused unprecedented destruction, ruining crops and livelihoods. The Myanmar government's working together with the United Nations and ASEAN on a 3-year recovery program. But they've only met a tiny fraction of the needs of people here. The task is enormous. When the storm swept across Myanmar a year ago, it left 138,000 people dead. In just 2 days, 800,000 residents of the Irrawaddy Delta lost their homes. The storm nearly halved food stocks in the area. 2.4 million survivors had little food or water. 1 year on, and the UN is asking for funds to help 130,000 families without adequate housing. Now look at this comparison. In 2004, after the tsunami hit Asia, international aid helped build these homes in Sri Lanka. The bill, $10,000 per household. But in Myanmar, donor money has only come this far, just $23 per household. So the future's still very uncertain, even for those who can now begin to rebuild. And what happens here in the coming months could prove to have a new disastrous effect to an economy of which 44% is made up of agriculture. Utut Naintong is a farmer in a small village, Ma Gu, in Bogalay Township. In this area alone, 10,000 people lost their lives the day Nargis arrived. He told us of the 78 houses, only 5 were left standing. They used to have 300 cattle to work their 450 acres of land. Now they've only got 20 cattle and a few tractors. And half of the land itself has been ruined by the storm surge.
Before Nargis, our village was doing quite well by ourselves. But after Nargis, it was totally devastated. So we have to start all over again.
In previous years, we could reap 65 baskets per acre of land, but this season we can only grow 25 baskets per acre, and prices are a little low compared with previous years.
Farmers make about $1.50 a day ordinarily. It's not enough for them to be able to save, to buy new cattle or tractors, or even to build proper new houses. They can't borrow any money because many of the wealthy landowners have died or have lost everything too. Crop prices have plummeted, making matters even worse. We've been told that some farmers are saying they won't bother to plant anything beyond their own needs this season because they can't hope to make a profit. There are serious worries that later on in the year, Myanmar could be facing a food crisis because so many farmers are unable to produce as much as previous years. This was one of the worst hit villages. Of its population of 800, only 100 survived. And their stories are extraordinary. This 6-year-old survived Nargis by grabbing onto a corpse that floated by. He's the only survivor of a family of 9. He says he misses his mother the most. His cousin was swept more than 4 hours boat ride away. Now the boy's aunt looks after them, but she's terribly worried about the coming monsoon. They can't even sleep at night under their tarpaulin. I asked her what she would say if she could speak to the rich and powerful in Myanmar and around the world.
Some people have proper houses, but we don't. So we would like to say to these people and Yangon leaders, if they would like to help, please help us, because we need help.
She's so terrified of another cyclone, she's sent her 7-month-old baby away to her parents in another village. But it doesn't take a cyclone to claim lives in the Irrawaddy Delta. UN figures show that in 2007, 74 of every 1,000 infants die before they're 5 years old. That's worse than Sudan, which receives more than 15 times as much aid per person than Myanmar. So within an hour of drawing her last breath, a little baby is buried by her father in her swaddling cloth, forgotten like the community she leaves behind.
The Myanmar government has faced stinging criticism for its isolationist policies, many saying that its initial refusal to accept Western aid lost lives. But it's also been argued that the subsequent coordination with international agencies meant a second wave of deaths was prevented. In a rare interview with a Myanmar government official, I asked Deputy Director General of the Department of Social Welfare, U Aung Tun Kaing, about the government's efforts so far. Thank you, Aung Tun Kaing, for joining us.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Why did it take so long for the Myanmar government to allow international aid and international humanitarian workers into Myanmar after Cyclone Nargis?
At the time, my ministry, the concerned ministry for the relief and recovery activity, so I am in charge of that office. We accept the international donation and international assistance, not delay.
But the international aid, which was on a much bigger scale, it took some weeks to begin.
Yeah. We feel that there's a big disaster, the enormous disaster first time. Yearly, we face some of the disaster, we can solve ourselves.
You thought that you could handle it yourself?
Yeah.
And then what happened?
Yeah, no, I sincerely say I cannot control that's rescue and relief activity. It's sincere.
Perhaps there were internal political reasons why the international aid was not accepted?
No, not that. That's government policy. Government policy not against the international. We work together, every activity work together, international committee. At the time, the UN National Humanitarian Coordinator, our ministry and that UN coordinator, very deep cooperation and coordination about the relief and recovery activity. Yes.
During other natural disasters like the tsunami, Sri Lanka, Indonesia were able to avail of international assistance from financial institutions like the IMF or World Bank. Can Myanmar pursue those avenues?
After the Nargis, we have so many challenges. At the time, we solved ourselves, but some of our neighbor country, especially China, India, Thailand, is very support to our country. So that's a problem. We saw our neighbor country, like that, ASEAN, our ASEAN. Also ASEAN Secretariat and ASEAN countries support to a lot of our country.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Aung Tun Kaing.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And we'll continue this exclusive in-depth look at the situation in the Delta region after the break.